Welcome back to another episode of Rob Sports Center, man. As you can see by the title, man, we're going to be addressing some more Shedeur Sanders conversation. My last video was about that. Now, I'm going to come at you guys with another video addressing it. So the thing has been him falling in the draft stock. So I don't know what they had Shedeur at previously in terms of draft pick. I'm assuming it probably was a number 1 through possibly 5. I would assume maybe even top 3, if anything. But I know they've been saying as of lately he's dropped down to maybe a number 9 pick, which would fall under the Saints. And I made a video kind of addressing from a Saints fan, because I am a Saints fan, how I feel about that. So, but I want to also address something too. With falling in terms of your draft stock, falling down to later numbers from a 1 through maybe 3 down to possibly a 7 to 11 isn't necessarily a bad thing. So let's look at the top. We're going to look at the top four picks, right? These were the teams that obviously we were probably hearing that him, Cam Ward, or whoever might be going to. Obviously, you got the Titans, who's at number 1. They was 3-14 last year. You got the Browns, who's at number 2. They was 3-14 last year. You got the Giants, who's at number 3. They was 3-14. Granted, they just signed Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. So if anything, I can see the Giants possibly taking Travis Hunter if he's still on the board over 2 quarterbacks, being that they just signed 2 veteran quarterbacks. You know, for them to go sign Russell Wilson and then Jameis Winston, or Jameis Winston and then Russell Wilson, however, whatever the order it was, I don't see them necessarily taking a quarterback and have him sit behind those 2. You know, even though we know that the Russell Wilson situation probably is a lot more temporary than the Jameis Winston, when Jameis Winston is only 31 years old. I forgot exactly how Russ is, but I would assume Russ is kind of up there at this point. Still a good veteran presence to bring in, but that's not a long-term solution. If anything, it's just a temporary situation for where they're at right now. So you look at the Browns. The Browns, they got Deshaun Watson. They didn't pay Deshaun Watson all this money, and they're not getting no return on their investment on that. So, you know, you're asking yourself, are they going to eat that money that they spent on him, or are they going to try to make situations work with that? But when you look at, you know, teams like the Titans right now, they got, I forgot who their quarterback is. He's not too good. Obviously, a 3-14 record shows you that. And all those teams show you that. Even if you go down to the Patriots, who was 4-13 last year, you know, they drafted Drake May, and obviously things ain't working out over there. But this is the thing I want to address too when we talk about falling draft stock. So really, falling in draft stock really is not a bad thing, especially for a quarterback. And this is why. Think about it. If you are a top 3 or maybe 4 pick, you're going to probably one of the worst organizations in the NFL, in the National Football League, right? When you look at teams like the Titans, who's 3-14, teams like the Browns, who's 3-14, teams like the Giants, who's 3-14, these were horrible football teams. But you have to think about it. For you to lose 14 games and only win 3 games, you have to ask yourself, is that just bad play, or is that as a whole, as an organization? And these 3 teams that we just named, and even if you include the Patriots in there, these are 4 teams that are struggling franchises. The Patriots haven't had any success after Brady left, and for sure after Belichick left. People like to say, oh, well, they stopped having success after Brady left. Well, they made the playoffs 1 year after Brady left. But after that, you know, it wasn't too good. And then later on, that next year, I think Belichick leaves. So they've been struggling. The Giants have been struggling. The Browns have been struggling. The Titans have been struggling, right? So you take a quarterback, a young quarterback who probably wasn't properly developed, who might have played within a different system offensively at whatever school they went to, and you say, okay, he's the face of our franchise. He's the savior. So now you put all of this pressure on a guy who's maybe the oldest might be 24 years old, who's never really been tasked with changing a whole organization around. And that's a lot to ask for any young man. So when you think about it, not only is the play horrible, you got to think about the coaching. You got to look at the players and say, okay, let's dissect what they're doing offensively, play calling wise. What are they doing special teams, play calling wise? What are they doing defense, play calling wise? Are they putting the players that they have in the best possible position to be successful? So for you to lose that many games, it kind of tells me that you're probably not. Then you got to look at the moves that's being made. You look at the Browns. The Browns went and paid Deshaun Watson all this money after he hadn't played in 2 or 3 years? You see, like, that's just not smart. You look at the Giants. The Giants paid Daniel Jones all that money off of one successful season, and they let Saquon Barkley walk. So when you look at the decisions there, it could be up and down from when you're looking at the top five teams that have the top five draft picks, because there's no accident. There's no incident that you're that bad. So you drop down. I just named the top 4 teams. So now you're going to drop down to number 5. You got the Jaguars, who was 4-13, but they got Trevor Lawrence. You got the Raiders, who was 4-13. They just signed Geno Smith. You got the Jets, who just lost Aaron Rodgers, so that was 5-12. I don't know what's going on with that situation. You got the Panthers, who was 5-12. They got Bryce Young. Obviously, they benched him, but I highly doubt that they want to move forward with, probably draft another quarterback. I think that their situation that they're dealing with, just as well as a lot of these other teams, are much more than just a quarterback. You got the Saints, who's at 5-12. And I'm speaking from a Saints fan. When you look at teams like the Saints, right? Because obviously the next 2 teams will be the Bears, which they drafted Caleb Williams last year. So you know doggone well they're not drafting no quarterback this year. And you got the 49ers, who was 6-11. They got Brock Purdy right now. So you know they're not drafting no quarterback. So now we go to a team like the Saints. You fall down to number 9 with the Saints. You look at the Saints, right? We have an aged quarterback in Derek Carr, who's not getting any younger and who's not getting any better. We have a youthful quarterback in Spencer Rattler, who hasn't shown what he can fully do because the Saints never allow for him to catch a rhythm, right? So when you look at the team as a whole, you got good skill players. You got Chris Olave, you got Rashid Shaheed, you got Alvin Kamara, obviously. You got Juwan Johnson, a tight end. You swap over to the defensive side of the ball. Pretty good ball game, pretty good team there. Obviously, later on throughout the year, it kind of hurt us in a lot of areas, but these are teams that have pieces to the puzzle there, right? And they're struggling to identify the main piece for us, and that's a quarterback. So you take a guy like him, like Shedeur Sanders, and put him on a Saints team that's already a pretty good football team, and you look at bringing in the offensive play caller, Kellen Moore, from the Eagles. You look at what he done with the Eagles, you obviously assume that similar success will be had with New Orleans, obviously. So you bring him in with that. And you pair all that together. I would assume that Kellen Moore is a pretty good coach in terms of developing and helping his guys get to the next level. I feel like he's pretty good at this, especially with what we have. And then just kind of being around the Eagles front office with making the decisions they made draft-wise and offseason signing-wise. And you put him with a team like that, and you look at the success. Like, I always use this as an example. Think about Patrick Mahomes. Think about all the success that Patrick Mahomes has had within the NFL. Super Bowls, AFC Championship appearances. It's been so much that it's even been compared to Brady. But you ask yourself, if Patrick Mahomes was took number 1 overall, right? If he was took number 1 overall and he went to a dying franchise that was needing a savior, would he have been the same? Would he have been as successful as he is now? Then you think about going to Andy Reid, one of the best offensive play callers in NFL history. Would he have been? That played a very vital part into his development, because I watched the interview where Patrick Mahomes was saying that he didn't learn how to pre-snap reads defensive wise, like how you see how Tom Brady comes up to the line, look at the defense, and based off what he thinks they're in, he changed plays. He was saying that he didn't learn how to do that maybe until his third year in the NFL? I think second or third year. And he had been playing quarterback for like 6 years. But you don't think that Andy Reid had a part to do with that? And then even when you look at on the defensive side, you look at Steve Spagnuolo, one of the best defensive play callers in the NFL. So you don't think that having that stability and that safety blanket of a defense to know that, okay, all I have to do in this game is maybe just come out and just not turn the ball over and allow our defense to get these stops and just kind of, manage the game in a sense. I don't necessarily have to come out here and throw for 400 yards and 4 passes, and 4 touchdowns. So I'm saying that to say, look at the structure that's going to a team that's already complete, and look at the structure of going to a team that's struggling. Like, let's go. I even wrote down some of the top picks from the last few years, and we're going to look at their success and their transition in the NFL. So we're going to go to 2009. You got Matthew Stafford, who eventually went to a Super Bowl well after he had been drafted, after he was with a new franchise with the Los Angeles Rams. And in 1 year at that, he was able to do that. So that shows you the importance of coaching, that shows you the importance of structure and stability. It shows you that, right? You look at Sam Bradford, who was drafted #1 in 2010. He didn't have too good of a career in the NFL. You look at Cam Newton, who was drafted #1 in 2011. Obviously, we know Cam had a very successful career, went to a Super Bowl, didn't win one, but he still got there. You look at Andrew Luck, that was drafted #1 in 2012. He had a good career, but the team was just horrible. You know, he took a lot of hits, he took a lot of damage, and obviously we would assume that probably is what led to him retiring at such an early age. You look at Jameis Winston, who was took #1 in 2015. You know, he's had somewhat of a successful career, but nothing of higher magnitude. You look at Jared Goff, who was drafted in 2016. Obviously, you know, Jared Goff went to a Super Bowl, but that's part of being with the Sean McVay system that had previously where Matthew Stafford was with the Lions, and as soon as Jared Goff leaves or they trade him, now they go and win a Super Bowl. You know what I mean? Look at 2018. Look at Baker Mayfield was took #1 overall. Baker might have had one phenomenal year at Cleveland, who was a struggling franchise. You can tell based off of what they did with paying Deshaun Watson, and look at where he's at now. You look at Kyler Murray. The success ain't really transferred over. You look at 2020, Joe Burrow. Obviously, you know, Joe Burrow went to a Super Bowl, but look at the first year. Joe Burrow got hurt because they couldn't protect him. And look at him this past season, too. They couldn't protect him. And the defense wasn't that good. So you look at the phenomenal season that he had, it don't mean nothing because the defense couldn't stop people. And when it was needed, the offense couldn't hold up in pass protection. So you look at 2021, Trevor Lawrence was took #1 overall. He might have had one solid year and things just haven't got rocking and rolling. Obviously, you look at 2023, Bryce Young was took #1 overall, and you look at him being benched, 3 games into the season of last year, and you look at with them benching him and then putting him back in. So it's a lot of inconsistency there within that organization. And then you look at 2024, Caleb Williams. And what was said, too, about Caleb Williams. Man, we don't need to put all this pressure on him. He's just a younger player. We need to make sure that he's in a system that better fits, that fits his abilities and development, right? And you look at, they had a down year this year. You know what I mean? And you can't blame it all on Caleb Williams because that organization was tore up before he even got there. You know what I mean? So you got to kind of pay attention to those things. Now, obviously, they got a new play caller this year, getting the Lions offensive play call. I think, what is it, Ben Johnson? So obviously, we're expecting to see different results, but that shows you the importance. So when you're taking these top guys like Shedeur, Cam Ward, or whoever else, and putting them on these top teams, I think the biggest thing you get, obviously, is a signing bonus being like a top, I think like a top tier pick. But when you look at longevity in terms of a career, ultimately being picked early for a quarterback is almost a death sentence, man, because you're coming into a franchise. Let's just say from a fan standpoint, we're struggling. We haven't made the playoffs in X amount of years. It's almost embarrassing to say that you are a fan of this organization. Right? So you put all these expectations. And if you had a guy who was good in college, you got the analysts, you hear analysts saying, oh, this guy's a generational talent, or this guy can, is this, that, and the third. You start believing in the hype and you start projecting it on him. So once his first game comes out, you got these expectations of you need to succeed now. You need to thrive now. You need to be successful now, opposed to, okay, man, this might take 1 or 2 years. We got to look at, do we have the right things around him? We got to first make sure that we got an offensive line that can protect him. Then we got to make sure he got that he got receivers that he can throw the ball to. We got to make sure that we got a running back and once again, an offensive line to where we don't have to put a lot of pressure on him to have to try to win the game with his arm. And then we got to make sure that we got a defense, because if we do got a quarterback that can win games with his arms, but we don't got a defense that can stop the other team from scoring, that's not going to take us very far either. So it's a whole bunch of different nuances within that. We got to make sure that we got kickers that can make kicks whenever they're needed. We got to make sure we got punters that can put our defense in phenomenal field position to where they're not in a position where they give up 20 yards, 30 yards. They in the red area now. And the team probably coming off with 3 points regardless if they don't get a touchdown. So there's a lot of things that we have to look at. But in my opinion, I would say Shedeur falling, I would say that might possibly be a missed opportunity for teams that pass on him for whatever reason they're passing on him. Because once again, when we talk about Shedeur, the main thing that I'm hearing is his arrogance, his cockiness, his flash. It's nothing about his play. I'm not hearing nothing about people saying what he did at college in Jackson State. I'm not hearing nobody saying what he did at college at Colorado with less than what Cam Ward. I'm not hearing none of that. All I'm hearing is things that absolutely means nothing in between the white lines. But that's just my take on it. I do not think that it's a bad thing for Shedeur to fall down. Once again, like I said in the last video, as a Saints fan, man, I would actually be happy if we were able to get him. But that's just my take on that, man. Let me know what you guys think about that. Man, that's it for this video. If you did enjoy this video, do me a big favor, man. Smash that thumbs up button. Also, if you're new to the channel, man, make sure you subscribe. And when you subscribe, make sure you got that post notification bell on, and where you be notified every time I upload. And I'll see y'all in the next video.